In 1971, an entire family vanished from their suburban Arizona home. Dinner left on the table. No signs of struggle, no trace of where they went or how. For decades, the case haunted the community, then faded into silence. But in 2023, a young woman buys a vintage Polaroid camera at an estate sale, one that came from the very house the Langleys once owned. Inside a sealed film cartridge, what it captured was never supposed to be seen. Subscribe for more real-life-inspired true crime mysteries. What you're about to hear is based on a case that was buried for over 50 years. Phoenix, Arizona, September 3rd, 1971. The ceiling fan turned slowly above the Langley family's dining table, its blades catching the fading orange light of a desert evening. Shadows lengthened across the floor, stretching from the hallway to the kitchen like fingers reaching for something unseen. Dinner was still warm. 4 plates, roast chicken, canned green beans, and buttered rolls. The glasses were half full. One of them, a small blue plastic cup, had tipped on its side, its contents soaking into a paper placemat colored in crayon by a child's hand. At the table, 2 chairs were tucked in. One was pushed back, slightly angled. The last sat empty, but still pulled out as if someone had left in a hurry. A small wind-up toy dog spun in slow circles on the floor near the living room carpet, its mechanical barks now silenced by time. The family's actual dog, a terrier named Mags, scratched at the front door, whining softly. The front door was wide open. Neighbors would later say they noticed the lights were on well past midnight. That wasn't like the Langleys. Not Edward, who worked sunrise shifts at the power plant. Not Clara, who always tucked the kids in by 8:30. And certainly not Sammy and Beth, 7 and 5, who were never out of sight on a school night. But no one called the police that night. Not yet. It was Clara's sister who found the house. The next morning, everything was quiet. The car was still in the driveway. The beds were unmade, toothbrushes still damp. Clara's purse sat on the counter next to the fridge. Edward's wristwatch, cracked and worn, was in its usual spot on the nightstand. And in the living room, half hidden beneath the curtains, was the family's Polaroid land camera, strap coiled, lens fogged with fingerprints, flashbulbs spent. No bodies, no blood, no sign of forced entry, no farewell note, no ransom demand. Just a house frozen in the middle of life, abandoned mid-century. Within 48 hours, the search began. Dogs, helicopters, canvases, phone calls. The case made local, then national news for weeks. Reporters parked outside the house. Psychics wrote in from across the country. Theories ranged from cult abduction to carbon monoxide poisoning to Edward snapping under pressure and killing them all, though no bodies ever turned up. But slowly, as the seasons changed, attention faded. Leads dried up, and eventually the Langley house was just another tragic address with a cold history. The new owners gutted it in the 80s, stripped the wallpaper, changed the floors, painted over the nursery. But even then, the rooms never seemed to hold warmth. Renters came and went. In time, the property became a foreclosure. Then an estate sale listing buried among hundreds in a dusty storage lot. No one ever figured out what happened to the Langleys. No one even realized the camera had never left the house. Inside it, untouched for over 50 years, the film waited. In the dark, still sealed, still loaded, still holding what may have been the last images the Langley family ever saw. And in 2023, someone finally pressed develop. The heat pressed down like a hand. Not the dry, sunburnt heat tourists imagined when they pictured Arizona, but the kind that seeped into your bones, thick and still and hard to breathe through. Claire stepped out of her car and immediately regretted wearing jeans. Her shirt clung to her back before she reached the sidewalk. The estate sale wasn't much to look at, just a sagging one-story house with flaking beige paint and a brown lawn that hadn't been watered in weeks. The porch creaked beneath her steps as she joined the handful of browsers already inside. The air smelled like dust and lemon-scented cleaner, fighting a losing battle. Claire moved through the living room slowly, avoiding eye contact with the older couple, arguing over a grandfather clock. She wasn't looking for anything specific. She never was. These kinds of sales were her habit, a way to unwind between freelance photography gigs, a ritual she'd picked up after her mother died. Most of the time, she left empty-handed. Today, she wasn't sure why she stayed. The furniture was dated. Sun-fed couches, water-stained coffee tables, a console TV that had probably last worked during the Reagan administration. An old woman in a yellow vest sat near the front door, handing out numbered stickers to buyers. "Is this your listing?" Claire asked, gesturing to the space. "Nope," the woman said without looking up. "Belonged to a cousin of the bank manager. Place has been empty for years. Never even hit the market." Claire nodded politely and wandered deeper into the house. The back room was cooler. A dusty ceiling fan clicked rhythmically above boxers labeled with peeling masking tape. The clutter was what caught her eye. Old radios, shoe boxers full of tangled cords, mismatched tableware, and a shelf of National Geographic issues from the 60s. A milk crate sat wedged in the corner, beneath a pile of kitchen towels. She bent down and tugged it free. Inside, nestled among cracked picture frames and rusted cookie tins, was a camera, a Polaroid land camera. Model 210, heavy, cool to the touch, the kind her mother used to carry on road trips. Claire turned it over in her hands. The rubber grip was worn smooth, but the shutter button clicked when she tested it. It still had a strap, and surprisingly the film compartment wasn't empty. She popped it open. There was a full sealed cartridge inside. Claire blinked. Most people left these things empty to avoid corrosion, but this one looked intact. A strip of yellow tape stretched across the top, sealing the cartridge shut. Something had been scribbled on the tape in faded ink, almost illegible now. She tilted the camera to catch the light. "Do not develop." A chill crawled up her arms despite the heat. It could have been a prank, a joke, or some superstitious scribble from a paranoid relative. But something about it didn't feel like a joke. Still, Claire couldn't put it down. "How much?" she asked the woman at the front. "For what? The camera? The Polaroid?" $5, the woman said. "Everything in that back room is priced too clear." Claire handed her a 10 and waved off the change. She left without looking at anything else. That night, she sat at her apartment's kitchen table with a camera in front of her and a mug of lukewarm tea she'd forgotten to finish. Her apartment was a converted guest house. Small, quiet, filled with plants and books and tools of her trade. The only light came from a desk lamp, angled down at the Polaroid. She ran a cotton swab along the cartridge slot, cleaned the lens, replaced the corroded batteries with fresh AAs. The camera powered on. It hummed faintly. Claire hesitated. Her fingers hovered over the film door. "Do not develop." She thought of throwing the cartridge away or slipping it into her storage box and forgetting about it. But that wasn't who she was. Her brain was already working the angles. If the film was usable, And that was a big if. It might hold photos from the late 60s or early 7th South. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe it was gold. She peeled back the tape. The glue had hardened but gave way with a sharp crackle. She loaded the cartridge into the camera and pressed the shutter. The machine made a mechanical whirry sound as the first photo emerged. Black. Just black, overexposed or expired. She laid it on the table and tried another whir. The second image came out just as blank. But the third Claire froze as the photo began to develop. A dining room, mid-century table, for place settings, roast chicken and green beans. The light fixture above was old, the ceiling fan just visible in the frame. It was like a time capsule, a perfect frozen moment. But there was something wrong with it, something she couldn't quite place. She held the image closer. In the corner of the photograph, by the edge of the frame, was a hand. Just fingers white-knuckled and curled tightly around the corner of the table. Not posed, not smiling, gripping. She set the photo down. Her heart was beating too hard now. She took another shot. The camera whirred. Another photo slid out. This time it was a hallway. Yellow walls, family portraits on the right. The perspective was strange, as if someone was standing too close to the lens, like the shot was taken in a hurry. The final photo emerged slowly. It was the same room, but empty. No food, no plates, just overturned chairs. The light fixture above tilted slightly, its glass cracked, and in the doorway leading outside, a small shadow. A child face turned away. Claire leaned back, stunned. It wasn't just that the pictures were old. It wasn't just the creepiness of the photos themselves. It was the overwhelming sense that she was seeing something no one was meant to find. That these photos had been taken on a night when something had gone terribly wrong. She turned the camera over again, scanning for a name, a serial number, anything. A faint label was stuck to the inside of the strap. Langley, 4128 Sycamore Street. Claire sat very still. She knew that name. Not from photography, not from history, from a podcast episode she'd half listened to last year. It was the one about the family that vanished from their Phoenix home in the 70s. The house that had never been resold. The case that went cold, the Langleys. She looked down at the photo still developing on the table. The child in the doorway was barefoot, and the shadow stretching toward them was not theirs. Claire didn't sleep that night. The 3 photographs sat like quiet warnings on her kitchen table, arranged in the order she'd pulled them. The final one, showing the empty room and the child's silhouette, seemed to darken by the hour, like it was holding something back until it was ready to be seen. She sat cross-legged on her couch, laptop open, typing keywords into a dozen search tabs. Langley family disappearance, 1971, Phoenix missing family dinner table, Sycamore Street, Cold Case, Arizona. Family vanished, Phoenix Polaroid it didn't take. Long there it was, halfway down the search results on a website called Echo Coal Files, a true crime archive run by former journalists and investigators. The title of the entry made her stomach tighten. The Langley house. The family that vanished. Mid-meal, Phoenix, Arizona. September the 3rd, 1971. For family members, disappear without a trace. The article was detailed, disturbingly so. The Langleys had been a quiet, working-class family. Edward Langley worked for the Salt River Project as a lineman. Clara was a part-time church secretary. 2 kids, Beth, 5, and Sammy, 7. No history of debt, no custody battles, no criminal background. The last confirmed sighting was at the grocery store around 4:30 p.m. A neighbor reported seeing Edward watering the front lawn around 6 o'clock. By 8, the lights were on, but no one answered the door. By morning, the house was silent. Clara's sister found it just like the photos Claire had pulled. Food on the table. Nothing touched. Door wide open. Police arrived within the hour. There were no signs of forced entry. No broken windows. No bloody footprints. No suicide notes. Just a home that looked like its inhabitants had simply stepped out of existence. The case spiraled quickly into the surreal rumors of cult activity. UFO sightings in the desert that week. A man who claimed he saw the Langley children walking along Route 17 with a woman in a yellow dress, but who later recanted after failing a polygraph. What struck Claire the most was the final paragraph. Among the household items found at the scene was a Polaroid land camera model 210. It was logged into evidence as inactive. The film compartment was empty. The camera disappeared from evidence storage sometime in the 1980s, most likely auctioned or discarded during departmental downsizing. The original chain of custody was never recovered. Claire leaned back from the screen. Her hands were shaking. Again, the camera she found was the camera from the case. She grabbed her phone and opened her notes app, jotting down everything she knew so far. It was how she worked, like piecing together a visual puzzle. She needed to see the timeline, map it out, trace every clue until something clicked. Then she paused. If she had the camera, if the film was original, that meant the photos she developed had never been seen by investigators. These were undeveloped at the time of the disappearance, which meant one terrifying thing. Someone, likely the person responsible, had taken them, then left the camera behind, assuming the film would never survive. It had, and now it was speaking. The next morning, Claire drove to the Phoenix Public Records office. The building was cool and gray inside, all vinyl tiles and humming fluorescents. She signed in, gave her ID, and asked for public access microfilm on the Langley case. The clerk, a woman in her 60s with sharp eyes and a librarian's gait, took a long look at her. "You? A reporter?" "Photographer working on a personal project." The woman didn't press. She disappeared into a back room and returned 5 minutes later with a box labeled Langley Disappearance, case number 719204. Music. Claire slid into a viewing booth, fed the first roll into the machine, and began turning the dial. The old headlines blurred by. Missing family. Stunn's community dinner table still set. But where are the Langleys? Police. No leads? No suspects? In vanishing case? She paused at one article from September 7th, 1971. The front page included a black and white photograph of the dining room, taken by police. Claire squinted. The shot was nearly identical to the one she had developed at home. Same angle, same lighting, but something was missing. In her photo, the hand gripped the corner of the table. In the police photo, that part of the table was cropped out entirely. She flipped to the report details. Several lines were blacked out. Note: film recovered in camera was blank. Possible light exposure. Camera logged. No further analysis requested. Object considered non-evident. That made no sense. Claire knew how durable old film could be. Even if light damaged, fragments should have shown up. But someone had clearly written off the film or lied. She leaned back, staring at the screen, unsure if what she was feeling was adrenaline or fear. Something about this case had been deliberately buried. That night, Claire called her friend, Dominic Tran, a forensic technician she'd met 3 years ago while shooting a documentary series on cold cases in Flagstaff. He owed her a few favors. "Are you sitting down?" she said after he picked up. "I'm literally slicing pizza over the sink. What's up? I need you to run a name through your system." Rodrigo's pause. "That's random. It's a lead connected to a missing persons case from 1971. I found photos, ones that were never logged." Dominic sighed. "You're serious? I have the actual camera." She heard his breath catch. "Okay, I'll check quietly. But if it's an active investigation, it's not." She said it's ice cold. But now it's thawing. Later, Claire couldn't stop staring at the photo with the child. She took out a magnifying lens and examined the aegeas, the shadow behind the child. It wasn't smoke. It wasn't furniture. It was a figure. Tall, angular, unmistakably human, but wrong. The head was slightly too large for the shoulders. The arms long, like the elbows bent the wrong way. The face was turned just enough to suggest features, but blurred beyond recognition. Not by motion, but by intent. Claire sat frozen in her chair for a long time. Then she did something she hadn't done in months. She pulled out her recorder and hit record. Log entry 1. Langley House. Polaroid film recovered. 3 photos developed. First, dinner table, full meal. Hand visible in frame. Second, hallway. Partial blur, off-kilter angle. Third, room empty. Child in doorway, unidentified figure behind them. Film appears original. Timestamps missing. Investigative materials from 1971 confirm similar room setup. Evidence suggests someone remained in the house after disappearance. Possibly a 5th person never identified, beginning independent investigation. She turned off the recorder and for the first time in her life, she felt like the photo had taken her picture back. Claire didn't leave the apartment the next day. The 3 developed Polaroids now sat in protective sleeves inside an archival box she used for high-value prints. But she couldn't stop looking at them. Every time she did, the 3rd photo, the one with the child in the shadow, seemed to shift just a little more, like it didn't want to be still. She spent the morning digitizing the images with her DSLR, adjusting light levels and contrast, running them through photo enhancement software on her laptop. She didn't add anything, just clarified the shadows, trying to tease detail out of the grainy film. It wasn't just a figure behind the child. It was a man, or something close to one. Broad shoulders, elongated neck, arms strangely rigid at his sides. No obvious face, just the suggestion of a mouth slightly open. The figure stood halfway in the hallway, as if caught mid-step. It hadn't been posed. It had been caught by accident. The timestamp metadata was corrupted, of course. Old Polaroid. Film never had digital time signatures, but the dust on the lens, the streaks on the emulsion. Claire could estimate the shot had been taken at or just after sundown, the final light before a house went dark. She opened a new project folder on her desktop, Langley Photographic Evidence Raw, and started uploading the files. By noon, Dominic called Iran, the name you gave me, he said. Raul Dreyfus. There's no record in any major state database. No driver's license, no arrest record, not even a DMV entry for the 1970s. What about property records? Claire asked. Anything tied to Sycamore? Street. There's one head, Dominic said. Deed transfer for 428 Sycamore in 1981 from county repossession to a trust named Desert Willow Holdings. The trustee on file, Ardrios. So, he took control of the property after the Langleys vanished. Looks that way. Might have been a shell name. I dug into Desert Willow Holdings. It dissolved in 1983. No tax returns. No business filings. Just vanished. Claire's heart started to race. Dominic, if this guy staged the disappearance and then bought the house through a trust, it's not just suspicious, it's premeditated. No, he said, but that's not even the weirdest part. He paused. I looked up the original forensics from 1971. The film was logged as damaged, declared blank. But guess who signed off on the analysis? Claire waited. Detective First Class Vernon Dreyfus. Her skin prickled. You think they were related? Same last name? Small city department back then. Would have been easy to fudge paperwork, especially if you wanted something to disappear. Claire stared at the camera sitting on her desk. I have Vernon Dreyfus's signature scanned. Dominic added. Want it? Yes. Send everything. That night, Claire pulled the blinds and set the photos out again. She placed the third image, the one with the child and the man, under a large magnifying glass and tilted the lamp low. Then she saw it. In the top right corner, barely visible unless the light hit just right, was a sliver of reflection in the hallway mirror. It wasn't part of the figure. It wasn't the child. It was someone else. A third presence. A face watching. Claire staggered back from the table. No matter how she angled the lamp, the reflection remained. A warped face with vacant eyes, wide, close to the mirror, as if whoever it was had been hiding just out of frame. She grabbed her notebook and wrote, "Third person, visible in mirror. Reflection appears too high to be child, possibly observer or photographer. If Langley family is gone, who took the final photo?" She stared at the question for a long time. Then she circled it twice. 2 days later, she drove to 428 Sycamore Street. She hadn't meant to go. She told herself it was just curiosity. But when she passed the street on her way to a shoot across town, something in her gut twisted. She made a quick turn, parked, got out. The house stood exactly as it had in the photos. Single-storied chipped white paint, overgrown shrubs, choking. The windows, a real estate sign hung crookedly on the chain-link fence, half covered in vines. For sale, bank-owned property, no entry. Without Agent Claire walked the perimeter slowly, camera slung over her shoulder. She shot a few wide angles from the sidewalk, framing the front porch, the kitchen window, the cracked walkway leading up to the door. It was quiet, too quiet. She moved to the side gate and found it unlocked. Slipped through. He in the backyard, weeds stood chest high. A rusted swing set leaned against the fence. One of the chains hung loose, the seat lying flat in. The slider door was boarded shut. Claire raised her camera, but just before she took the photo, she felt it. A presence like someone was standing behind her. She spun around. No one, just dry grass and the groan of cicadas. Still, she didn't take the shot. Instead, she backed out of the yard, returned to her car, and locked the doors. As she pulled away, she glanced back through the rearview mirror. The curtain in the front window moved, only slightly, but enough to know it hadn't been the wind. Back home, Claire transferred her exterior photos onto her computer and began processing them. She zoomed in on the front window. The curtain had parted, and behind it, half hidden in shadow, was a face, not a reflection, not pareidolia, an actual face. Wide eyes, pale skin, the nose flat, almost pressed against the glass. She enhanced the exposure slightly. Her stomach dropped. It was a girl, young, maybe 10 or 11, not Beth. Not from the original photos. Someone else. Claire grabbed her notebook. Face in front window appears to be girl. Who is she? Why is she inside? She circled the entry, underlined it, then sat back, unable to breathe. If the house was empty, abandoned, then who was still living there? Later that night, Claire posted anonymously on an old cold case forum she used to visit back in college. She included stills from the photos, heavily watermarked and cropped to protect the originals, and asked one question. Has anyone connected the Langley disappearance to Vernon Dreyfus? Former detective? Any relatives? She didn't expect an answer. But by morning she had a private message from Eyes Open 1976. I grew up near Sycamore Street. I knew the Langleys. I also knew Vernon. You're not wrong to be digging, but be careful. People tried before. A local journalist in 1985. Woman from the college newspaper. Both ended up quitting or disappearing entirely. This isn't a story. It's a burial site. I can meet you, but only in public and only during daylight. Claire stared at the message, heart pounding. She typed back, name a place. The diner smelled like bacon and floor wax. Claire sat at a corner booth with her camera bag beside her and a recorder in her coat pocket, turned on and running. She watched the front door with growing nerves, scanning each person who entered. She hadn't told anyone. Mercy was meeting her source. She deleted the forum message thread as soon as they'd agreed on the place. Eyes Open 1976 had chosen a family-style diner just off Interstate 17. A place called June's Breakfast House. Open since the 1960s, mostly filled with truckers and retirees. Public, safe, bright, but still, Claire felt a pit at the base of her stomach. Edra. 10:17 a.m., the bell over the door chimed. A man in his mid-50s walked in, dressed in a faded army jacket and jeans. He had a face that had once been square and strong, but was now softened by time, lined, leathery, alert. He moved cautiously, scanning the room the same way she had. Their eyes met. He gave a nod and walked toward her. Claire? She stood. Your eyes open. Name's Thomas Bell, he said, sliding into the booth. Used to live 3 doors down from the Langley house. Back when I was a kid, Claire took him in. He looked like someone who didn't trust easily. Probably hadn't for a long time. You're not a cop? He asked. No? FBI? No? He finally relaxed a little. Good. Cops had their chance. They didn't take it. They ordered coffee. Thomas didn't speak until the waitress left. I still remember that night. He said, September 3rd, 1971. I was 10 years old. Lived on Sycamore Street my whole life until I was 20. My dad was a mechanic. My mom taught piano. He sipped his coffee, then looked her in the eye. I heard the Langleys vanish. But they didn't vanish, Claire. Somebody took them. Claire kept still. Do you know who? Thomas glanced around. No one nearby was listening. I can't say for sure, but I'll tell you what I did see. That night, around 8 o'clock, I was in our backyard looking for our cat. Our fence backed up to theirs. I saw someone at their sliding door. A man. He was tall, big shoulders. I thought it was Mr. Langley at first, but then he stepped into the porch light. He looked away. It wasn't Edward. What did he look like? Thomas. Didn't answer right away. You ever see someone and just know something's wrong? Not because they're doing anything, just because of the way they feel in a space. This guy didn't walk like he belonged in that house. He moved slow, deliberate, like he was acting, but didn't understand how people are supposed to move. Claire's throat was dry. I only saw him for maybe 10 seconds, Thomas said. Then he turned and closed the sliding door. Lights inside went off a minute later. After that, the house was just still. Did you tell anyone? My dad, but he said I was imagining things. Said I is being dramatic. That the Langleys probably just went on a trip and forgot to tell someone. The police came the next day. I told them what I saw. Know what they did? She shook her head. Nothing. They didn't even write. It done. One officer patted my head and said I had a vivid imagination. Told me not to talk about it to the neighbors. Claire took out the digitized photos and laid them on the table. Flipped over for privacy. I found these in the original camera from inside the house. You need to see them. He hesitated, then nodded. She turned them over one by one. The dining table, the hallway, the child in the doorway with the looming figure behind, and then the enhanced crop of the mirror showing the watching face. Thomas stared at them for a long time. Then he exhaled sharply and said, Jesus, that's not Edward Langley, Claire said. That's someone else. Maybe the man you saw. He tapped the mirror image. That's not a reflection from inside. Look at the height. The way the eyes are level with the hallway trim. That person standing in the wall. Claire blinked. What do you mean? I mean behind the mirror. That part of the house had an access crawl space, an old one. I remember from when the Langleys had some plumbing redone in '70. My dad helped with the job. The mirror is built into the drywall, but there's room behind it. Claire leaned forward. So, someone could have been hiding? Thomas nodded slowly. That house has dead spaces, crawl tunnels, storage gaps between walls. It was built cheap and fast in the 50s. It's like a honeycomb in there. Her mind raced. The child in the photo wasn't just in danger. They were being watched from multiple angles. Claire lowered her voice. Do you know anything about Vernon Dreyfus? Thomas looked up sharply. I haven't heard that name in years. He was lead detective on the case. Signed off on the film, evidence is blank. Later acquired the house through a shell trust. Thomas's jaw clenched. That doesn't surprise me. Dreyfus was dirty. Everyone knew it. But no one had the stones to say it out loud. He was obsessed with that case. Spent more time in that house than anyone else. My dad said he kept going back at night, even when the investigation was closed. Claire's skin crawled. Why? Don't know. But people said they saw lights on when it should have been empty. Sometimes a car parked down the street with the lights. Alf Dreyfus died in the 90s. Heart attack, I think. But the whispers never stopped. Some say he wasn't just covering something up. They say he lived there for a while in secret. Claire looked down at the photos again. Then who's in the house now? Thomas didn't answer. Back at home, Claire uploaded her interview recording and filed it alongside the photos. She stared at the enhanced mirror image, now digitally cleaned and sharpened. What if the house had never been empty? What if it had always been watching? She opened her recorder again. Log entry 2. Interview with Thomas Bell. Eyewitness from 1971. Confirmed sighting of unknown male at Langley resident, same night of disappearance. Description matches figure in third photo. Possible hidden access behind hallway mirror. Implies second photographer or observer. Next step. Re-enter 428 Sycamore. Document wall interiors. Investigate crawl space. Attempt contact with current occupant if any. She closed her laptop, heart pounding. Then she packed her flashlight, gloves, and camera, because if the answers weren't in the photos, they were. Still inside the house, Claire waited until just before dusk, She parked 2 streets over from Sycamore, changed into dark jeans and a black hoodie, and a packed light. Just her camera, a small LED flashlight, latex gloves, and a crowbar wrapped in a towel. She told herself this wasn't breaking in. It was reclaiming evidence. Something had happened in that house, and if the system wouldn't chase the truth, she would. As she walked the last 2 blocks, the wind picked up, scattering dry leaves across the sidewalk. The neighborhood was quiet. Half the houses looked vacant, the rest are run down to have security systems. The Langley house sat like a bruise in the middle of it, forgotten and fading, its porch light long dead. Claire ducked behind the side gate and slipped into the backyard. The slider was still boarded up. She knelt by the window nearest the back of the house, the same room shown in the second Polaroid. The screen was rusted at the corners. She pried it off carefully, then pressed her hands against the glass, unlocked. She hesitated only a moment, then pushed. The window groaned upward on the warped rails. Claire slid inside and landed in the dining room. It was cold, colder than it should have been for an Arizona evening. The air inside felt still, unmoved, like it had been sealed for decades. She clicked on her flashlight and swept the beam across the room. The wallpaper was peeling. The light fixture above the table hung crooked, missing one bulb. Dust coated every surface. The room was frozen, almost just like the Polaroid. But the table and chairs were gone. So were the plates. Only a faint rectangle of cleaner floor tiles remained where the table had once stood. She made her way to the hallway. The floor creaked under her feet, the sound loud in the silence. She passed a faded family photo. Edward, Clara, Beth, and Sammy, all smiling. Beth wore a blue dress with white daisy buttons, the same dress as in the police report, the same dress from the photo. Claire kept moving. The hallway ended at a door, closed, but not locked. She pushed it open. It was a bedroom. Pink wallpaper, sun-faded and peeling. Stickers of cartoon animals dotted the closet door, a child's room. The window had been painted shut, and the room smelled of old fabric and dry air. She turned back toward the hallway and stopped. To her left, halfway between the dining room and the child's bedroom, was the hallway mirror. Large oval framed in black painted wood. It was clouded now, but unmistakable. This was where the reflection had been captured. Claire reached out and touched the glass. Cold. She knocked. Hollow. She stepped back and examined the wall. A faint seam ran around the mirror's frame, just wide enough to suggest it wasn't flush with the drywall. She pressed along the edges. One corner gave way. A panel popped loose with a quiet snap. Behind it, darkness, a crawl space. Claire slipped on her gloves, pulled out her flashlight, and crouched down. The opening was tight, maybe 3 feet tall. She angled her headlamp and slid in on her stomach, pulling herself forward on her elbows. The space stretched behind the walls like a narrow tunnel. Beams, old insulation, pipes. She coughed as dust rose around her, but kept moving. After 6 feet, she hit a junction. Another passage branching off at a hard right toward what would have been the living room wall. She turned. The beam of her flashlight caught something ahead. Something that wasn't wood or pipe. She crawled forward until it came into focus. A cot metal framed covered in filthy blankets. Next to it sat an overturned crate used as a makeshift table. On it a water bottle, an old lighter, a torn-in comic book, and a Polaroid photo, face down. Claire's breath caught. She reached forward and picked it up. It was another image from 1971. Same film, same type, This one showed a close-up of a little girl's face. Beth Langley. She was crying, her eyes red and swollen. Her hands were tied in front of her. The background was too dark to place, but the flash illuminated enough. The child had been photographed after the disappearance. She turned it over. In faded ballpoint pen, someone had written, "She still cries, but not for long." Claire felt the panic rise in her throat. She turned off her light, held her breath, listened, and heard it. Breathing, not hers, shallow, raspy from deeper inside the wall. Claire backed up slowly, her elbows scraped insulation. Her knees caught on something sharp. She didn't dare turn the light back on. The breathing grew louder, then stopped. She crawled faster, heart too, lungs burning. She twisted out of the crawl space and fell back into the hallway, gasping. Her hands shook as she reattached the panel, pushing it flush against the frame. Behind the wall, something scratched softly against the wood. Not violently, not fast. Just enough to let her know it was there. She grabbed her bag and ran for the window, climbed out without closing it, hit the yard, and sprinted through the gate. She didn't stop until she reached her car. That night, Claire sat on her bed with a new photo laid out on her pillow. Her hands still shook. She recorded a new log entry. Log 3. Evidence recovered from crawl space behind hallway mirror. Polaroid image shows Beth Langley post-disappearance. Confirmed physical distress. Message on Beck implies ongoing captivity. Suggests at least one family member survived for extended time. Crawl space inhabited recently. Evidence of water. Comics sleeping cot. Heard active breathing while inside wall. No known occupant of house listed in property record. Returning tomorrow with backup. Bringing Thomas. She closed the recorder and then locked every window in her apartment. Claire didn't sleep that night. She sat at her desk replaying the sound in her head. The low, steady rasp of breathing from inside the crawl space. Not animalistic. Human. She'd heard enough to know the rhythm of lungs. Not panic, not fear. Someone had been watching her. She stared at the Polaroid photo of Beth Langley lying on the desk under a sterile reading lamp. The image was clearer now, cleaned up through Lightroom, clarified, but not less disturbing. Beth's hands were bound with coarse rope. Her hair had been cut unevenly. The lighting was harsh, the kind used in basement or closets. A flash with no diffusion. But it wasn't just the girl. Claire had zoomed in. In the left side of the frame, behind the child near her shoulder, was the soft curve of something metallic, almost hidden behind shadow. The corner of a camera lens. Someone had taken a picture of the photographer. She called Thomas Bell just after sunrise. "I need you to meet me. 10 a.m. sharp. You okay?" "No," she said, "but I think I found where they were kept, and I wasn't alone." There was a pause. "Send me the address again," he said. "I'll bring a pry bar and a crowbar, just in case." They met at a gas station near the Sycamore neighborhood, parked Claire's car behind a shut-down dry cleaner, and walked the remaining blocks in silence. Claire had brought her camera, gloves, flashlight, recorder, and a new item, a handheld gear counter, which Dominic had mailed overnight from Flagstaff. Not to check for radiation, but for electrical activity and magnetic interference, anything odd behind the walls. "I don't want to be surprised again," she told Thomas. "You won't be alone this time." They entered the house through the same window. Inside it was just as cold. The smell was stronger now, something faintly organic, like mold or mildew mixed with the lingering musk of old insulation. Claire led him to the hallway. "This is it," she said. "The mirror, the hidden spaces behind this panel. Thomas examined it, nodded, and carefully pried it loose. The panel came off clean, and the tunnel gaped open like a mouth. "You really crawled in there?" "Yeah," she said. "And something was in there with me." Thomas clicked on his flashlight. "Let's confirm." Together, they entered the crawl space. Claire crawled behind him this time. Her gloves scraped wood and wire. She pointed out the cot, the comic book, the photo. Thomas picked it up, turned it over, and read the message. "She still cries," he murmured. "Jesus," he sniffed. "There's something else." "Do you smell that?" Claire nodded. "Yeah, I couldn't figure it out." Thomas pushed farther, rounding the corner where the tunnel branched. He shone the flashlight ahead and stopped.